love doing the football. I love being with the players and everything. And they said, well, if you got a phone call tomorrow to say that had ended, what would you be left with? Like, what's yours? And the answer was nothing. You can't do a podcast. I was like, why? Because everyone does podcasts. Like, there's literally so many podcasts. You just thought, well, I'm going to work in telly and make my mark. She said, you need to do exactly the same thing with your podcast.
What tips would you give to someone who's thinking of starting their own?
First of all, go for it. Because I honestly was this close to not doing it. The great thing about podcasts that I didn't have in my life was ownership. So I'd spent my career working for Children's BBC, working for Formula One and the BBC, working for the Premier League on BT Sport. And I sat down with someone and they said, how's your career? And I said, yeah, it's great. Like, I'm really happy. I love doing the football. I love being with the players and everything. And they said, well, if you got a phone call tomorrow to say that had ended, what would you be left with? And I was like, I don't know. I have to go and find another job. And they said, so what do you own of all these years of graft and hard work? Like, what's yours? And the answer was nothing. And then their next question, they obviously knew what they were talking about. They said, what do you really want to do? And I said, well, I don't really care if Liverpool beat Man United or Norwich City beat Ipswich. Not really. But I love like the effort and the graphs, and I love sitting with the pundits. I love the way that Rio Ferdinand and Steven Gerrard watch a game of football. I love how they turn up looking smart, or they bring their own food in little plastic containers still. Or the day that I first met Lewis Hamilton and he walked in the room and he like took off his watch, and he didn't just chuck his watch on the side. He got it and he closed up the clasp and he put it down and he moved it, and he got his little bracelet off and he went. And he took his... And I just looked at it and I thought, that desire for perfection, that elite mindset mentality. I said to them, that's what I want. I want to speak to elite performers and elite thinkers, because I think that everyone can benefit from that. Everyone can think and operate and perform better, because there's no tricks, there's no secrets. Like, you just need to have the passion and go out and do it. And they said, well, then that's what you should do a podcast. So that was it. Right, great. I'm doing a podcast. And then I mentioned it to a couple of people and they went, why? You can't do a podcast. I was like, why? Because everyone does podcasts. Like, there's literally so many podcasts. You're not going to make a splash. There's thousands of podcasts. And then I rang an old friend of mine from Children's BBC, and she is, I haven't really even ever told her this, but she's the reason I do the podcast, Fern Cotton, who does Happy Place. I said, hey, I'm thinking of doing a podcast. Now, she is such a nice person. She is not the sort of person to go, oh, hold on, a rival podcast. Yeah. She'd never even consider that. She went, oh my God, you'd be great at doing a podcast. Like, she spoke about what it was about. And I said, but my issue is I just think that like there's loads of them out there. And then she was the one that said, look, we worked together at Children's BBC. Yeah. Television had been invented for 50 years. There must have been hundreds of channels, thousands of programs. Did you think I'm not going to work in telly because there's already loads of TV programs? No, of course you didn't. You just thought, well, I'm going to work in telly and make my mark. She said, you need to do exactly the same thing with your podcast. So the first thing you have to do your podcast. You have to go out and do it. But the second... And
that's the biggest challenge though, isn't it? Starting, it's just in every facet of life.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurs contact me and I'm like, the biggest risk you face of all the things that might...
Yeah, but I think you can do a podcast risk-free though. You know, you can spend a very minimal sum of money, if any money at all, on the equipment.
100%. But
and like, you can then...
so cheap.
Yeah.
You could do a great podcast in terms of sound quality with less than £100.
Yeah.
The risk though is overthinking it to the point of procrastination, to the point of like paralyzing yourself. Yeah. I think in all facets of life, business, my DMs are full of people that are like, Steve, I want to start a business. I have an idea. I want to start a podcast or this project. But there's just this one problem which is preventing me starting. And I always say the biggest risk of the success of your business, the number one thing that's going to stop you becoming a billionaire, honestly, is the probability that you'll just never start. And also that you'll think you need all of the answers to all of the questions you have before you start.
Yep.
Well, I don't know this. I don't have the funding. Like when I started my business, I was 18, didn't know the word entrepreneur, no money, went on Google and typed in like how to build a website, spent 3 months Googling it. But that was me starting, you know? And I think it's the same with podcasting. I'm like, my first episode was dog shit. I was downstairs in some cupboard.
What is it in telly? We say the first is the worst. Yeah. You know, that's the way it is. That's the way it has to be. But the point is, you got going. You started. And I think you need to begin, and then you need to be consistent, and you need to keep going, and don't expect instant success and instant gratification. But I think the other thing for it, like I get a lot of people sending me letters saying I want to be on the television. And I always reply in the positive, because I always say, well, someone has to be doing my job in 20 years' time. When I'm 62, I will not be presenting the Premier League on BT Sport. I just won't be. Someone has to be. Could be you. Why not make it you? Make the decision now that it's going to be you that's the next well-known sports TV broadcaster. And then I remind them that when I started out in 1998, 99, to be on the telly, to be a broadcaster, you actually needed a job. That was not very easy to go and get. Now you can pick up your phone and you're a broadcaster. You can have a YouTube channel. You can have an Instagram handle. You can have a Twitter page. You can have a podcast, as long as you've got a passion. Because you then funnel everything into that passion, and everything feeds everything else. So the Instagram handle points people towards the podcast. The podcast is fantastic. So people go and watch the podcast that you've recorded on YouTube, and then you start to build an audience there, and you make a little bit of money, and it slowly starts to build. Be consistent, but have the passion, have the thing that's different. Like I will get maybe 10 times a week, "Hi Jake, I just wonder whether you would come and be on our podcast. We just want to talk about, your journey and how you got to where you are now. It'd be really great to have a chat."
And you roll your eyes.
And it's like, man, you've got to be better than that. Yeah. Everyone can go and have a conversation about your journey and the highs and the lows and the struggles. What's the niche? What's the thing?
Tell me what someone would have to say to you that has basically no listeners or is starting out that would make you go on their podcast. Because
passion, be absolutely, definitely about their passion. And I have done plenty of podcast interviews in the last year where there hasn't been a big audience, but I've really loved the fact that the person has come to me, known a lot about me, and said, I really want to explore this particular area with you. I think just the broad brushstroke of, can we just talk about your inspiration and talk about your upbringing and talk about how you first got into broadcasting?
Yeah.
I'm a bit like this now in everything I do. Like even when I'm broadcasting, I'm not interested in can Man United win the league. I am much more interested in looking at one of the players, Marcus Rashford, for example, and having a really proper, deep conversation with Paul Scholes and Rio Ferdinand. Like, explain to me how hard it is for him to concentrate on football when he's got so many people criticizing him on social media for doing the school dinners, or how difficult is it for him to run out to Old Trafford and really perform at a high level when he hasn't got 80,000 people. How much of a difference does it really make to have the crowd at Old Trafford there inspiring you and driving you on? Like, that is a much, much more of an interesting conversation for me because it feels much more real than just the general stuff. So that would be my advice to people, is make it really specific, make it really passion based.
And there's that bit you said about like you want them to show evidence that they've done their research on you. So, because listen, people send emails inviting you onto a podcast or DMs, whatever, but most of our lives and the success of our lives, at least as I can recount it in my journey, has been predicated on me knowing how to ask someone for something that they really didn't have a huge clear incentive to give me, but asking in the right way. So we're not just talking about inviting Jake onto podcasts here. We're talking about how you ask for something, how you knock on a door that, maybe is a bit above you at that point.
I think that often you get a lot of respect there just for asking the question. And I think the other thing is for people to remember when they're in our position, you've been in that position as well. Like, you have been there.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.